I was standing in my living room with my suitcase by the door, sunscreen on my arms, my favorite floral maxi dress, pressed and ready, a straw tote resting against the wall. After years of mostly staying home, this cruise felt like a small miracle, a break, a reward. Time with my son and daughter-in-law. I had been looking forward to it for months, imagining ocean sunsets and quiet conversations, pretending for once that we were still close. Then my phone buzzed. A text from my son, Andrew. Greater than, "Mom, we've decided you're not coming on the cruise this time. We want to go just real family." Everything froze. My heart began to pound so loudly, I could hear it in my ears. My fingers tightened around the phone, then started to shake. The suitcase beside me suddenly felt embarrassing. Like I'd dressed up for something that had never truly been mine. Real family. I read the message again, and again. It didn't change. Before I go on, if you're watching this on the channel, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. And please like and subscribe before the story continues. Because what happens next isn't just about a cruise, it's about boundaries, dignity, and a decision that changed everything. Just hours earlier, I had been smiling to myself, double-checking reservations, thinking how rare it was for all of us to do something together. This was supposed to be my first trip in years, one I had helped pay for, like I always did when it involved Andrew and his wife, Lauren. I lowered myself onto the sofa, phone still in my hand, and then a second truth settled in, heavier than the first. Only a month earlier, I had made the final mortgage payment on their house. My name was still on the title. The property taxes for the last 3 years had come from my retirement account. Whenever money was tight, I stepped in quietly, without conditions. Yet with one text, I was no longer considered family. This wasn't new. Since Andrew married Lauren, I'd been slowly pushed to the edges. Sunday dinners became rare. Invitations stopped arriving. My opinions were outdated. I talked too loudly. I embarrassed them. I missed my granddaughter's baby shower, their anniversary party. Celebrations I only learned about through photos online. Still, I kept helping. When the kitchen renovation went over budget, I covered the difference. When their car broke down, I loaned mine. During the pandemic, I transferred money without ever asking when I'd be paid back. I was good enough to support them, just not good enough to belong. I stood up slowly and walked into my study. There was a drawer I rarely opened, not because I'd forgotten about it, but because opening it meant facing a conversation I'd avoided for years. Inside was a blue folder. The deed, the title, every receipt, every transfer. My name was there, clear and unquestionable. I had never transferred ownership to them. Andrew always brushed it off. "Why rush, Mom? We're family." Funny how the meaning of family changes. That night, as photos of cocktails and sunsets from the cruise began appearing online, something inside me settled into place. I wasn't angry. I wasn't desperate. I was resolved. And when they came back from that cruise, they would learn something they never expected. When Andrew wrote "real family," he probably thought the damage would be emotional. He had no idea it would be structural. Because the moment I closed that blue folder the night before, something irreversible had already begun. If you're still here, take a second to like this video. Not for drama, but because stories like this remind us why boundaries matter. The next morning, I arrived at Mark Davis's office 10 minutes early. I chose a light blue blouse, the kind that made me feel composed. Not powerful, just steady. I wasn't there to argue or threaten anyone. I was there to understand exactly where I stood. Mark greeted me with the same calm professionalism he always had. We'd worked together for over a decade. Investments, wills, paperwork I hoped I'd never need to rely on. He motioned for me to sit. I placed the blue folder on the table between us. "I need clarity," I said. "No emotions, just facts." He opened the folder and began flipping through the documents, page by page. his expression tightening in a way that told me everything before he even spoke. After a long moment, he looked up. "Julie," he said carefully, "legally, the house is yours." The words didn't shock me. They grounded me. "You're listed as the primary owner. There's no transfer of title, no partial ownership agreement, no trust. You paid the majority of the mortgage and all recent property taxes. You can sell the house at any time without their consent." I nodded slowly. "What about their belongings?" I asked. "You're required to give reasonable notice. 30 days is standard. Storage arrangements can be handled professionally." I exhaled. Not relief, confirmation. I hadn't imagined this. I hadn't misunderstood anything. I hadn't overreacted. I had simply been too patient for too long. I left Mark's office with a strange feeling, not triumph, not revenge, but something steadier. Control. That afternoon, I made another call. A real estate agent recommended quietly among professionals. Someone discreet. Someone who didn't hang signs or post photos online. "I want a fast, clean sale," I told her. "Serious buyers only." She didn't ask questions. She didn't need to. "The location alone will attract interest," she said, "especially if the price is fair." I set a fair price. Not inflated. Not punitive. I wasn't trying to profit from my son's discomfort. I was reclaiming what had always been mine. Meanwhile, Andrew and Lauren were on the cruise. Their social media filled with photos, cocktails on the deck, spa treatments, elegant dinners, perfect smiles framed by blue skies. That's when I noticed something else. The charges, every indulgence, every drink, every excursion was being billed to my credit card, the one still linked to the reservation. That wasn't carelessness. That was entitlement. I froze the card immediately. Then I blocked their numbers. From that moment on, all communication would go through my attorney. 2 weeks later, the agent called. "We have an offer," she said, barely containing her excitement. "Full price, cash. They want to close immediately." I signed the papers, without hesitation. 2 days later, the deal was complete. The money went straight into my account. And I chose the handover date carefully. The exact day Andrew and Lauren would return from their cruise. They were still somewhere at sea, smiling for photos. And their house was no longer theirs. If you're still watching, take a moment to like this video, because what happened next wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, and that's what made it devastating. I didn't go to the house myself. I didn't want confrontation. I didn't want raised voices or tears on the driveway. Everything I did from that point forward followed one rule: no emotion, only procedure. The movers arrived early that morning. Professional, courteous, efficient. Andrew and Lauren's personal belongings were packed carefully. Furniture, photographs, keepsakes. Nothing was damaged. Nothing was rushed. Everything was cataloged and placed into a secure storage facility under my attorney's supervision. By noon, the house was empty. By evening, the new owners had their keys, and taped neatly to the front door was a single envelope printed on legal letterhead. "Notice: this property has been legally sold. Your personal belongings have been placed in secure storage. You have 30 days to retrieve them. All communication regarding this matter must be directed to the office of Attorney Mark Davis." I reread the letter once before walking away. No signature from me. No explanation. No apology. That chapter was closed. That night, I packed my own things, just the essentials, and drove to a small beachfront apartment I'd rented quietly. It wasn't large. It wasn't luxurious, but it was mine. The sound of the ocean filled the room instead of tension. No one told me I spoke too loudly. No one corrected my opinions. No one implied I was an inconvenience. For the first time in years, I slept without bracing myself. The next morning, I turned my phone back on. Dozens of missed calls. Voicemails. Messages ranging from disbelief to rage. I didn't listen to any of them. Instead, I called Mark. As expected, he said calmly, "They're extremely upset," claiming they had no warning, that it was their house. "What did you tell them?" I asked. "That the title is in your name. The sale was lawful. They have 30 days to retrieve their belongings." I thanked him and hung up. Then I sat on the balcony with my coffee, watching the waves roll in and out, feeling something unfamiliar settle in my chest. Peace. By noon, social media did what it always does. Lauren posted a story. "Some people can't accept that their children grow up and start their own families. Beware of gifts with invisible strings." Asterisk. I didn't respond. Silence was my answer now. That afternoon, my sister called. "Julie," she said, already emotional, "Andrew is devastated." "How could you do this to your own son?" I took a breath. "The house wasn't his," I replied calmly. "It was mine." "But family doesn't do things like this," she insisted. I paused before answering. "Family doesn't exclude you from trips you helped pay for," I said. "Family doesn't use you for years and then tell you you're not real family." She was quiet after that. That night, I stood by the window of my new apartment, listening to the surf, and understood something clearly for the first time. I hadn't taken anything from them. I had stopped giving endlessly to people who had already decided I didn't belong. And tomorrow, they would finally face me. When Andrew asked that question, he wasn't angry. He was scared. If you're still watching, pause for a second and like this video. Because this part isn't about property anymore. It's about guilt, manipulation, and the moment a parent stops being blamed for an adult child's choices. We met at Mark's office the next morning. Neutral ground. No raised voices. No emotional ambushes. Andrew walked in alone. Lauren wasn't there. That told me more than anything else could have. My son looked exhausted. Dark circles under his eyes. His shoulders slumped, like the weight of the last few days had aged him years instead of nights. He sat across from me, hands clasped tightly. "Mom," he said quietly, "why did you do this to us?" I didn't answer right away. I waited until my breathing was steady, until I could speak without defending myself. "I didn't do anything to you, Andrew," I said calmly. "I exercised my legal rights over property that belongs to me." "That was our house," he replied, frustration creeping into his voice. "We lived there for years." "Yes," I said, "you lived there, in a house in my name, with most of the mortgage paid by me, and all the property taxes paid by me for the last 3 years." He ran a hand through his hair. "We were going to pay you back." "When?" I asked gently. "When you had money for cruises and spa packages? Or when you texted me that I wasn't real family?" His head snapped up. "I didn't mean it like that," he said quickly. "Lauren was stressed about the trip. I shouldn't have worded it that way." "You didn't just word it," I replied. "You sent it, and you meant it enough to let it stand." The room went quiet. Then Andrew asked the question that had clearly been haunting him. "So, where are we supposed to live now?" I looked at my son, really looked at him. A grown man. A husband. A father. "You're adults," I said evenly. "You both have jobs. You can rent a place. People do it every day." He stared at the table. "You didn't think about how hard this would be for us." I nodded slowly. "I did," I said, "just like I thought about how hard it was for me to stand alone with a suitcase, ready for a trip you cut me out of without warning." He swallowed. The meeting lasted less than 20 minutes. No shouting. No tears. Just facts. As we stood to leave, Andrew looked at me with something I hadn't seen in years. Uncertainty. Not entitlement. Not confidence. But the realization that his mother was no longer someone he could take for granted. 3 days passed. The phone stayed silent. I blocked their numbers not out of spite, but for peace. In that quiet, I began settling into my new life. The apartment was modest, but the balcony faced the ocean. I hung a few old photos on the wall and drew, as a little boy, smiling with missing teeth. No wedding pictures. No reminders of where things went wrong. One morning, while sipping coffee, my phone rang. "Mark." "Julie," he said, "Andrew and Lauren have hired an attorney." I closed my eyes briefly. "What are they claiming?" "They're arguing. There was a verbal agreement that you'd eventually transferred the house to them. They're also pointing to a few installments they paid." "Do they have a case?" "Very weak," Mark replied. "There's no written agreement. No witnesses. And partial payments don't override ownership." I nodded. "What do you recommend?" "For now, we respond formally, calmly, legally." After the call, I sat on the balcony longer than usual. For a moment, guilt tried to creep in. He was my son, after all. But then I remembered something important. Love without boundaries doesn't stay love. It turns into permission. And I had finally withdrawn mine. Just when I thought the conflict couldn't reach any deeper, it found my granddaughter. If you're still watching, take a second to like this video. Because this part isn't about money or houses. It's about a child caught in the middle of adult mistakes. I was sitting on the balcony that morning, coffee cooling in my hands, when an email notification popped up on my phone. The subject line made my chest tighten. "Please read, Bella misses you." The message wasn't from Andrew. It wasn't from Lauren. It was from Helen, Lauren's mother. I opened it slowly. She wrote that Andrew and Lauren were staying at her apartment for now. That Bella kept asking where I was. Why Grandma hadn't visited. Why she couldn't come see the ocean again. Regardless of what's happening between the adults, Helen wrote, a child shouldn't lose her grandmother. Tears blurred the screen. Bella, my 4-year-old granddaughter. The little girl who used to run toward me with sticky hands and loud laughter whenever Lauren allowed a visit. I replied carefully. I told Helen I missed Bella deeply, that I never intended to disappear from her life. That if Andrew and Lauren agreed, I would love to see her even briefly. The response came quickly. I'll speak to them, Helen wrote. I can't promise anything, but I'll try. I closed my laptop and stared out at the water, my heart torn between hope and dread. Later that day, I received another call from Mark. They're escalating, he said. They're preparing to challenge the sale formally. I listened quietly as he explained the next steps, timelines, legal language that felt cold compared to the ache in my chest. After we hung up, I realized something important. This wasn't just about defending myself anymore. It was about protecting my peace and Bella's stability. That afternoon, I decided to leave the apartment for a while. The walls felt too close. I walked barefoot along the beach, letting the sand ground me, watching families pass by, parents chasing children, grandparents holding hands with little ones. For years, I had shaped my entire life around Andrew and his needs, my time, my money, my emotional energy. And when I finally stepped back, I was painted as selfish. I stopped and looked out at the horizon. I was 66 years old, still healthy, still capable, still allowed to choose myself. That evening, Helen wrote again. Andrew and Lauren had agreed to let Bella visit me. With conditions? The visit would be supervised. Only 2 hours. Helen would stay the entire time. The restrictions stung, but 2 hours with Bella were better than none. We set the visit for Sunday. That morning, I woke early and baked the chocolate cookies Bella loved. I placed a small stack of picture books on the table and set 2 chairs on the balcony, facing the ocean. When the doorbell rang, my heart raced. Helen stood there holding Bella's hand. The moment Bella saw me, she let go and ran forward. Grandma. I knelt down and wrapped my arms around her, breathing in the familiar scent of children's shampoo, holding back tears. I missed you so much, I whispered. The 2 hours passed like minutes. We read. We laughed. We walked along the shore collecting shells. Helen stayed nearby but gave us space. When it was time to leave, Bella hugged me tightly. "Grandma," she asked softly, "why don't you come live with us?" The innocence of the question broke my heart. I smiled gently. "Grandma has her own place now, sweetheart. But I hope we can see each other more." She nodded, satisfied with the simple answer only a child needs. As they left, Helen paused. "She needs you," she said quietly. "I hope the adults don't forget that." That night, sitting alone under the stars, I made another decision. I would fight to protect my legal rights, calmly, firmly. But I would also do everything in my power to stay present in Bella's life. She wasn't a bargaining chip. She was a child who deserved love without conditions. I thought the worst part was being excluded. I was wrong. The worst part was discovering it had been planned. If you're still here, take a second to like this video. Because this is the moment when everything I'd tried to excuse finally collapsed. Mark called me early that morning. His voice was different, tighter. "Julie," he said, "we received documents from the other side during discovery. There's something you need to see." I drove to his office without finishing my coffee. He slid a printed email chain across the table. Andrew and Lauren. Private messages. Dates going back over a year. I read slowly. Lauren writing about how once the house is fully paid off, we'll be in a stronger position. About how mom won't say no forever. About how it's better not to push her now she cave when the time comes. One line made my stomach turn. Greater than, there was never any agreement to transfer the title. But if we wait long enough, we can claim implied ownership. I looked up at Mark. "So they knew," I said quietly. "Yes," he replied. "There was no misunderstanding. No confusion. They were waiting you out." Something inside me finally let go. Not anger. Illusion. For years, I'd blamed myself, thinking I'd been too sensitive, too demanding, too involved. I'd told myself Andrew didn't mean to hurt me. That Lauren was just stressed. That families go through phases. But this was strategy. I leaned back in the chair. "What does this mean legally?" I asked. Mark didn't hesitate. "It destroys their case." I nodded. "And emotionally?" He met my eyes. "That part is yours to carry." That afternoon, I went for a long walk along the beach. I thought about every time I'd second-guessed myself. Every apology I'd offered just to keep peace. Every check I'd written so love wouldn't feel conditional. And I understood something painful, but freeing. Kindness without boundaries doesn't soften people. It teaches them how far they can go. That evening, I made another call to Mark. "I want to end this," I said. "But I want to do it cleanly." He listened as I explained my decision. I would offer a settlement. I would reimburse the few mortgage installments they could prove they'd paid adjusted fairly, under the law. Not because they deserved it, but because I didn't want to owe them anything, not even resentment. Mark was quiet for a moment. "That's generous," he said. "No," I replied. "It's final." The offer was sent the next morning, and for the first time since that cruise text, I felt something loosen in my chest. Not victory, closure, but just as I began to breathe easier, another message arrived. Not from Andrew. Not from Lauren. From Helen. And it carried a warning I wasn't prepared for. I thought the legal fight was the hardest part. I was wrong again, because when a child becomes leverage, everything changes. If you're still watching, take a second to like this video. Not for the algorithm, but because this part is about protecting someone who has no voice in adult wars. Helen called me late that evening. Her voice was strained, lowered, as if she were afraid of being overheard. "Julie," she said, "I think you need to know something." I sat down slowly. "Lauren has been packing," she continued. "Not normal packing. Documents. Bella's passport. Clothes she never packs for weekends." My chest tightened. "Where does she think she's going?" I asked. Helen hesitated. "She mentioned a job opportunity. Far away. She didn't give details." but the way she spoke it sounded permanent. I closed my eyes. Lauren hadn't just been fighting me in court. She had been preparing an exit. With Bella? I asked quietly. Helen didn't answer immediately. That's what I'm afraid of, she said. I called Andrew the moment we hung up. He answered on the first ring. Mom? He said. What's wrong? I told him everything. There was a long silence on the other end. She wouldn't do that, he said finally. But his voice lacked conviction. She knows she can't just take Bella. People don't always act rationally when they feel cornered, I replied, especially when control is slipping. Andrew exhaled sharply. I'll call my lawyer, he said. Tonight? And to his credit, he did. The next morning, Andrew filed for an emergency motion, a temporary order preventing Bella from being taken out of the city without written consent from both parents. The school was notified. Custody schedules were tightened. We didn't tell Bella anything. Children deserve safety, not fear. For a few days, things seemed quieter. Too quiet? Lauren stopped posting online. She didn't respond to Andrew's messages. Helen said she barely spoke at home. Then, one morning, my phone rang before sunrise. It was Helen. Her voice was shaking. Julie, she said. Lauren and Bella are gone. My heart dropped. What do you mean gone? She was supposed to take Bella to school. Helen said. They never arrived. Her phone is off. Her room is empty. I grabbed my keys with shaking hands. I'm coming, I said. Andrew was already at the police station when I arrived. His face was pale, rigid like someone holding himself together by sheer will. The officer behind the desk spoke carefully. We've activated an alert, he said. Airports, bus terminals, neighboring states. The court order has been flagged. Andrew ran a hand over his face. Where would she go? He asked, voice breaking. We stood there listing possibilities. Relatives, friends, old vacation spots. Then Andrew froze. Her college boyfriend, he said suddenly. She kept in touch with him. He lives near the southern border. The officer nodded and took notes immediately. An hour later, Helen called again. I found something, she said. You need to come back here. We drove straight to her apartment. Helen met us at the door holding an envelope. Inside were bus tickets. Lauren's name, Bella's name, destination, near the border, and a handwritten letter. Andrew read it out loud, his hands shaking. Greater than, by the time you read this, will be far away. I can't let my daughter grow up controlled by money and power. I'm taking her somewhere we can start fresh. Please don't try to find us. Andrew crushed the letter in his fist. She's kidnapping her, he said hoarsely. Helen covered her face. I should have stopped her, she whispered. I put a hand on her shoulder. This isn't your fault, I said. But we're going to bring Bella home. The police moved quickly. The bus route was flagged. Border stations were alerted. We waited. Hours passed like years. No one ate. No one slept. Then, just before midnight, Andrew's phone rang. He answered. And then he collapsed into a chair. They found her, he said, tears spilling freely now. Bella is safe. Relief hit me so hard, my legs nearly gave out. Lauren and Bella had been located at a motel near the border. Local authorities were holding them. Bella was unharmed. That was all that mattered. As we sat there, exhausted and shaken, I realized something with painful clarity. This had never been about a house, or money, or pride. It was about control. And it had almost cost a child her sense of safety. The police said Bella was safe. Those 4 words carried more weight than any court ruling ever could. If you're still watching, take a second to like this video. Because this part is about what happens after the fear. When relief and consequences arrive together. Andrew traveled overnight with a family court officer to bring Bella home. I stayed behind, pacing the length of my apartment, replaying every possible outcome in my mind. I told myself to breathe, To wait, to trust the process. Nothing prepares you for the moment you see a child after something like that. When Andrew finally walked through my door 2 days later, Bella was holding his hand tightly. Her eyes scanned the room searching until they landed on me. "Grandma," she said softly. She let go of her father and ran. I knelt down just in time to catch her, wrapping my arms around her small body, feeling her heartbeat against my chest. She buried her face in my neck the way she used to when she was younger. "I didn't want to go," she whispered. "I wanted to come back to you and Dad." My throat closed. "You're home now," I said, holding her a little tighter. "You're safe." That night, Bella slept in the small room I'd prepared for her, one with the ocean view window and the shelf of books she loved. Andrew stayed on the sofa, exhausted but present, like a man who finally understood the cost of inaction. The legal consequences followed quickly. Lauren was questioned and released under strict conditions. Supervised visitation only. Mandatory family therapy. No travel outside the city without court approval. Joint custody was suspended. Andrew became Bella's primary guardian. Lauren didn't fight it. Not this time. Something about being forced to face the reality of what she'd done seemed to drain the fire from her. She looked smaller in the courtroom, less certain, less in control. The judge's words were firm. "This court's priority is the child's safety and stability. Any action that jeopardizes that will not be tolerated." I watched Lauren listen. For the first time, she didn't interrupt. In the weeks that followed, life reorganized itself. Andrew moved into a larger apartment closer to mine. Bella started spending afternoons with me after school. We baked cookies. We built sand castles. We talked about her drawings and her friends. Not once did we talk about the border. Children don't need to relive fear to heal from it. Lauren began therapy. Slowly, reluctantly, but she showed up. Helen remained quietly involved, often acting as a buffer present.com, focused on Bella rather than on blame. One evening, as Andrew and I watched Bella play on the beach, he spoke. "Mom," he said, "do you regret selling the house?" I thought about it. About the shock, the fallout, the pain it caused all of us. Then I looked at Bella, laughing as the waves chased her feet. "No," I said honestly. "It was painful. But it broke a cycle that needed breaking." He nodded. "I don't think I would have left that marriage if everything had stayed comfortable," he admitted. "And Bella would still be growing up around things we pretended were normal." Sometimes clarity comes disguised as loss. That night, Bella fell asleep on the balcony chair, wrapped in a towel after a long day in the sun. I carried her inside carefully, tucking her in, brushing hair from her face. She stirred. "Grandma," she murmured. "Yes, sweetheart. Can you stay?" "I'm right here," I said. "I'm not going anywhere." And for the first time in a long time, I knew it was true. I thought the hardest decision had already been made. I was wrong. Because sometimes the final test isn't about standing firm. It's about knowing how to stand firm without becoming what hurt you. If you're still watching, take a moment to like this video. Because this part asks a difficult question. How do you protect a child without turning love into leverage? 2 weeks after Bella came home, Mark called again. "Julie," he said, "Lauren's attorney has reached out." I closed my eyes briefly. What now? They want to renegotiate the education fund. Of course they did. Lauren was asking the court to release a portion of the money early. Her argument was carefully framed private school tuition. Better opportunities, acting in Bella's best interest. On paper, it sounded reasonable. In reality, it was familiar. Control, dressed up as care. She says, as Bella's mother, she has the right to decide how educational resources are used. Mark continued. She's requesting an immediate partial And our position? I asked. The fund is airtight, he replied. Purpose specific. Clear conditions. Both parents signed. It's meant for Bella's education when she turns 18. Changing it now would set a precedent. I thanked him and hung up. Then, I sat very still. I could have used this moment to assert power, to punish, to say no simply because I finally could. But that wasn't who I wanted to be. That afternoon, I went to visit Bella's school. Not because I doubted it, but because I wanted certainty. The classrooms were bright, the teachers attentive. Bella's academic coordinator spoke warmly about her curiosity, her confidence, her joy in learning. When I saw Bella through the classroom window, laughing with her friends, fully present, fully safe, something settled in my chest. She wasn't lacking. She was thriving. That night, I called Andrew. "I'm declining the request," I said calmly. "The fund stays exactly as it is." He didn't argue. "I agree," he said. "Bella doesn't need a new school. She needs consistency." The court ruled swiftly. The education fund would remain untouched. Bella would stay in her current school. Any future changes would require joint agreement. Lauren didn't hide her frustration. She posted vague messages online. She complained to mutual acquaintances. She tried quietly at first to complicate visitation. But something had shifted. Andrew didn't bend, and neither did I. One evening, Bella asked me a question while we were working on a puzzle. "Grandma," she said, not looking up, "are you and Mom fighting because of me?" My heart clenched. I set the pieces aside and met her eyes. "No, sweetheart," I said gently, "never because of you. Adults sometimes disagree, but none of this is your fault." She thought for a moment. "Okay," she said, and went back to the puzzle. Children don't need complicated explanations. They need reassurance. A few days later, Helen came by unexpectedly. She looked tired. "Lauren wants to move," she said quietly. "Out of the city. She's talking about starting over somewhere else." My stomach tightened. "Does Andrew know?" "He does now," Helen replied. "Legally, she can't take Bella without his consent." "But I thought you should be aware." I thanked her. After she left, I stood on the balcony watching the ocean shift with the tide. I had learned something through all of this. Boundaries don't have to be cruel. Compassion doesn't have to be weak. You can protect what matters without destroying what remains. And tomorrow, everything would finally come to a head. I had already learned how to let go of property. What I hadn't learned yet was how to let go of fear. If you're still watching, take a second to like and subscribe. Because this final part isn't about winning a legal battle. It's about choosing the kind of family you want to be part of. Helen's warning turned out to be timely. 2 days later, Andrew called me early in the morning. "Mom," he said, steady but tense, "Lauren tried to leave the city last night." My heart skipped. "What happened?" "She packed Bella's things again," he said. "Told Helen she was taking her to visit a friend." But the court order worked. The school flagged it. The police stopped her before she got far. I closed my eyes. Not relief this time. Sadness. Lauren hadn't learned. She had only become more desperate. The court responded quickly. Supervised visitation was tightened further. Any travel requests were denied outright. Lauren was formally warned that another attempt would result in the loss of visitation entirely. That was the moment everything finally shifted. Not because the law spoke louder, but because reality did. Lauren stopped fighting. She showed up to therapy. She followed the rules. She stopped posting. Not out of victory. Out of exhaustion. Life slowly found a new rhythm. Andrew settled into his role as Bella's primary parent, not perfect, but present. He learned how to cook simple dinners, how to help with homework, how to listen instead of avoiding conflict. Bella grew lighter. She laughed more. She slept better. She stopped asking if adults were angry because of her. And my apartment, once a temporary refuge, became a home. I planted flowers on the balcony, hung new photos on the walls, set aside a drawer just for Bella's drawings and shells. One afternoon, while Bella was building a sandcastle at the edge of the water, Andrew sat beside me. "Mom," he asked, "do you ever wish you'd handled things differently?" I thought about the cruise, the text, the suitcase by the door, and then I watched Bella run toward us, hair wild, face glowing. "No," I said quietly. "If I hadn't drawn that line, we'd still be pretending. And pretending isn't love." He nodded. "I see that now." That evening, Bella took my hand. "Grandma," she said confidently, "this is my favorite place." I smiled. "This?" I asked. "You mean the apartment?" She shook her head. "No," she said. "This, with you, and Dad, and the beach." That's when it finally clicked. The house I sold was just walls and paperwork. Home was what remained after I chose self-respect. As the sun dipped into the ocean, Bella stood between Andrew and me, holding both our hands. "Today was the best day ever," she declared. And for the first time in a long while, I believed her. If this story moved you, tell me in the comments. What boundaries have you had to set to protect your peace? And if you want to keep hearing stories like this about dignity, healing, and quiet strength, subscribe to the channel and stay with us. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do for your family is finally choose yourself.